I say this without any hint of hyperbole. Our republic hangs in the balance. And we are in the middle of an optics war that is raging right now in our country. Welcome to Americana X Newswatch. I'm Greg D, coming to you live from Los Angeles, California. Today we're talking about a republic. We're talking about things that can encourage us as conservatives as we are in the middle of this, what I'm referring to as an optics war. All right? And what is it that's putting us in this position right now? Well, stuff like a guy calling himself the president-elect when he is not yet the president-elect, and going as far as creating an office for the president-elect. What a douche. Am I right? I mean, can you imagine? You're running for president. You're trying to win the presidency of the United States. You want to basically be the most powerful man in the world. And rather than fight for the truth of, okay, let's get to the bottom of just how much fraud there was involved in this election. Let's take a step back. I really want to be a part of that process too, the same way you do, because I really want the country to be healthy. No, what this guy does immediately buys into the optics of his party and the extension of his party, which is the mainstream media and the tech oligopolies of the world. And then he just goes with this ridiculous narrative. And what do we end up getting? We get stuff like this. We get an image where you can see right in the front of his podium. It's got a little gold eagle on it, and it says Office of the President-Elect. Just as a quick little side note for this guy, there is no office of the president-elect. The whole idea of a president-elect is like you're in a holding pattern, all right? There's no reason to build an office there. The office is actually going to be the presidency, all right? So if you are the president-elect, there is no office for you at any rate. If you're new to the show, welcome to the Newswatch. This is a Common Sense Perspective weekly news show. It gives you a little bit of common sense perspective on our news cycle. The show is for conservatives that care about what's going on behind the sensationalized headlines. And that's really what we're talking about here today. We're getting beyond the news, and we're going to be talking about some things that are going to encourage you. We're going to talk about some stuff that's got some historical reference to it. You know, we're going to be talking about the optics war, but then we're also going to be talking about some reference points of what makes America great and how we can recapture some of the spirit of what makes a great republic. If you have been here before, I encourage you, you know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe. Also, share this video out to people in your network so that we can continue to grow a greater conservative movement promoting an awesome America. And hey, regardless of who ends up being president at the end of all this thing, our mission is not going to change. We are still promoting the best possible America that we can. All right, so let's do this together. All right, so we're talking about today this concept of an optics war. I've heard it kind of described several different ways by other commentators. Dave Rubin calls it a reality war. Tim from Timcast calls it a propaganda war. Steve Turley from Turley Talks calls it, he kind of highlights the difference between the mass society versus the network society. And what I'm talking about here, I'm sort of framing it in terms of looking at it through the lens of optics, okay? So what are optics? There's two definitions in the dictionary. The second definition is the way in which an event or course of action is perceived by the public, okay? So if we're talking about a course of the way that things are perceived by the public, right now what we have is we have an extreme amount of optic energy being generated by the left to push a very specific narrative. They want the entire country to accept that Joe Biden won the presidency and it's already figured out. We already put that one behind you, everybody. It's time to move on. He's the president-elect. You just got to give into it. But that's not what's happening in reality. He's not the president-elect. He's a guy that ran for president, but electors haven't even been assigned, and they haven't even cast their ballots. So there's right now a big question to the extent of how much fraud we just had in this past election. Now, if it's a small amount of fraud, and all of the lawyers and the investigation into this issue proves that it's a small amount of fraud, then yes, Joe Biden will be the president-elect at that time. But if in fact there was a systemic, extreme, outsized amount of fraud across multiple states in this 2020 election for the president, then that will be revealed. And at that time, most likely President Trump will be reelected for a second term. All right, so I am referring to this as an optics war because it really is about communicating and effectively convincing the American public of a vision for reality, or a vision for what's going forward for the next 4 years anyways. Maybe even looking at it through the lens of not just the foreseeable future, but a permanent future, a view of, the optics that describe a future going forward. So, an example is Joe Biden at the podium, standing there where it says Office of the President-elect. That's an example of optics, right? But it's very convincing. These optics, if it's the mainstream media and all of the big tech companies trying to promote a very specific message by determining the optics that you see, there's a lot of people that are going to buy into that. I would say there's even a shadow of that messaging that people buy into. Even some of my conservative friends will say things like, well, I think Donald Trump may have a 20% chance of turning it around right now. And I am hoping that he does it, but I think, and I've heard this not just from my friends, but I'll see it in even conservative news outlets. Another one that I've heard recently is that Donald Trump needs to complete the equivalent of 3 Hail Mary passes in a row for him to complete this, turnaround and him be reelected as president. And I don't know, I think I'm just not quite so glib about the whole thing. None of those things seem to really ring true with me personally. And I think it's because I don't really trust any of the optics being sold to me by the mainstream media or by the tech companies or even by the echo chamber or the echoing of all these messaging filtering throughout all of my peers' social media network stuff, right? So 20%, that's one number that got tossed out there. I'm like, I don't know about 20%. Maybe 50-50. Maybe that's more accurate to describe the chances that Donald Trump has. But then I was thinking it might even be more than a 50% chance for Donald Trump to win this thing. It might be much higher, in fact. And it's possible that if we are able to expose an extreme level of fraud in multiple states in this election, that the percentage could be more it's 99% chance that Donald Trump gets reelected, So I think it really does come down to exposing and proving the fraud. If they can do that, he's got a huge chance of winning. If they can't prove that, then he's got a very small chance of winning at any rate. And the people out there that are describing it like it's some kind of Hail Mary pass, this suggests a great degree of chance involved. Well, Donald Trump better just cross his fingers at this point. He better just toss the football into the end zone and hope there's one of his teammates there to catch it and bobble it around in the end zone. That to me does not seem accurate either. The way that I'm seeing it right now is maybe if you want to use a football analogy, it might be more like the 2-minute drill. Got a limited amount of time. We've got a series of plays that must be perfectly executed to get us from here to the end zone, right? But I feel like it has a lot more sense of personal volitional control over the situation than just tossing the ball in the air and hoping there's somebody on the other end, right? But rather than getting caught up in kind of like these surface level things that I'm talking about here, like is it 20%, is it 50%, I'd rather not keep our focus there or stay there for too long, but rather I'd like to shift our focus at this point to talk a little bit about the cause of all this nonsense, right? But also give us a little bit of encouragement from historical reference. So first off, the cause of all of this chaos and this confusion and this frustration that so many Americans are experiencing, both on the right and the left right now, there's a lot of frustration. That's all caused by the liberals that have more of a vested interest in them winning than seeing the will of the people done. If I'm threatened by the fact that other people might vote for the other guy, and I just can't stand the idea of that, then maybe I will do something desperate to just short circuit the whole deal so that those people never get to have their voice heard. And that's what we're seeing come from the Democrats right now. I hate to say it, but they are literally all in on this. They all encourage it. They all do not care what the general will of the people is. They only care about their own selfish desire to see their own ends met. But this is not the first time in history that we have witnessed what I will refer to as the evaporation of virtue. It's not me that said that. I'm actually getting that line from my reference here today, but I really love that as a way of describing what can happen at different points in time, right? At different points in American history. We can point to the failings of specific Americans, or maybe a group of Americans in a specific state or in a specific city. The evaporation of virtue. My source for this next segment I'm going into here, it's a course called America's Founding Fathers. You can find it on Amazon Prime right now. It's free for the next month. It's from the Great Courses, and the instructor, his name is Alan Gualzo, PhD. So, check it out, America's Founding Fathers, over on Amazon Prime. And Alan C. Gualzo, PhD, he is an instructor at the Gettysburg College. This guy is like super well versed in all things American history. So, there's a graphic from this thing. I felt like it was worth showing you here. In this graphic, I'm just going to read to you what's in the graphic if you're just listening. But the way that Dr. Allen describes a republic, I feel like is so succinct, it's so well said, it's worth just reading it to you, okay? So, a republic is held together by the virtue, public spiritedness, and self-denial of the people. Isn't that a great way to think about a republic? I think there is just something so cool about describing it that way. In fact, I'm going to read it to you one more time because we're about to go into an example of this right after I read this to you. Republics are held together by the virtue, public spiritedness, and self-denial of the people. And now I'm going to quote Dr. Allen again. Sovereignty, after all, rests in a republic with the people rather than the kings and the nobles. So the sovereignty rests with the people in a republic. Who do we have as the nobles of our time, right? If we have the kings and the nobles of today, you might say the guys that are the tech billionaires running all of our tech oligopoly companies up in San Francisco. Or you might say it's the big money donors of the political parties. Maybe it's the guys on Wall Street. Maybe it's the big unions with big money donating to our politicians. These would be our nobles of our time. But the sovereignty doesn't rest with them. It rests with the people. And if the people prove to be corrupt, selfish, and indolent, they will bring the roof of their republic down on their heads faster than any hostile emperor ever could. Now that's something to tune in on here, because the point that Dr. Allen is making here is the sovereignty rests in a republic with the people. But if the people are corrupt and selfish and indolent, they will bring the roof of the republic down. So now I want to just relay to you a short story that Dr. Allen highlighted from our early American history when he was while he was highlighting the story of some of our American founding fathers. When America was formed, 1776, we had 48 men that signed the Articles of Confederation. During that time, the formation of our country, we had 13 initial colonies. And they're all held together loosely by this Article of Confederation. At that time, a lot of the states were still very independent-minded. And because there was really just like this American Congress that would meet and it would just have representatives come from these 13 colonies, it didn't have a lot of power. In fact, a lot of the power was still left to the individual states at that time. And you could go a step further and you could say that the American Congress didn't have a lot of power to collect money. You know, they didn't have a lot of power to enact things like taxes and this kind of thing. So there was a lot of freedom and a lot of autonomy given to the individual states. And during that time of the 13 colonies, when they were getting together, they really did have to hold things together to fight for their independence from Great Britain. And of course, to sort of court the support of France, they had to show that they were a unified set of states. And that was important for this time as well. But even with the common cause of fighting against the great British force, you know, and relieving themselves of the jackboot of a monarchy pressing down on them, you know, and freeing themselves from the taxation without representation, the states still had a certain amount of self-centered leadership that would rather see their states, their individual states succeed, rather than seeing all the states together win. And if you just get 5, 10, 20 self-centered leaders that would rather see their progress, even at the expense of the other states that are around them, then you will get bad acting come out of that, right? And unless you hold that accountable, then you're going to get more bad acting from other states, right? And there's going to be a lot more pressure put on the states that are dependent on each other in a republic. One example of this that Dr. Allen points to is in the mid-1800s, Rhode Island had this practice where, so during the early forming of America didn't have great wealth of coin, or specie as it's called, right? It didn't have a lot of coinage. But what America was wealthy with was land. So what America did at that time, and what each one of the individual colonies did, was they would create paper money. Our first paper money was written backed by the value of land. So you would have people go and kind of create debt across state lines, and then they would have to pay that debt back over time, right? So what Rhode Island would do is they'd have like their system set up so that if they had citizens within Rhode Island that owed money to another state for trade or whatever was associated with that, then the court of Rhode Island would say, look, you just pay your debt to us, the court, and then we here in Rhode Island will forgive your debt that you have to the other state. And it started making states like Massachusetts and Connecticut really pissed off at Rhode Island. They're like, what is Rhode Island doing? And it took a while to hold Rhode Island accountable to basically using their own laws to just kind of create almost worthless paper money themselves and then just keep their own money that was really only worth something within their state system. So look, what I'm pointing at here is this. It is possible for a few bad actors to get together in a state and execute on a plan that benefits them at the expense of the states around them or the greater republic that they are a part of or they signed a contract to be a part of. And what are we seeing here today, right? What we are seeing here right now in America is another time, another season of the evaporation of virtue. And we're seeing it at a state level. And in some cases, you can drill down to a city level, like a city within that state. We're seeing it in multiple cities right now. This election could be determined right now by some fraud that was executed, and they got away with it in just a few cities around America. But you know, this isn't anything new. It's something that can actually be a comfort for us conservatives out there. This is something that's been going on since the inception of the original 13 colonies of our republic. What we're seeing right now is a few Democrat-run states actively implementing fraud to make Biden the winner of our presidential election. It's a very cynical, nasty way for a minority of extreme left-leaning or straight-up leftists to put what they want ahead of a fair election. If it's true that a republic is held together by the virtue, public spiritedness, and self-denial of the people, then this activity is, of course, antithetical to maintaining our healthy republic. And that is why I say our republic is hanging in the balance right now. The moves that are made right now and going forward in the near future will determine the strength of this republic. But this fraudulent activity, this narcissistic, self-centered activity by a few bad actors that would rather destroy the entire system than not win, that is what we're seeing. That is what we're witnessing. That is what we've got to fight right now. It's happening in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and several other states that would rather sow chaos, frustration, and confusion than see our country be unified and strong. And is the mainstream media, our big tech in San Francisco, and the entire liberal establishment that are complicit in supporting this fraudulent activity by attempting to control the optics to support the fraud. That is what we're seeing right now. This optics war that is raging in America, this is a pivotal moment in history. Those of us that are truly patriots for America would rather see an honest election than see our guy win, right? Those of us that have that psychology, that are true patriots, we are going to have to fight this optics war. We are going to have to engage. It's the main reason why I'm doing this show right now. Americana X Newswatch. That's why my channel, Americana X, exists to fight this optics war. We are living in the middle of a history-defining reality war. Conservatives want to conserve the reality of America, described as a positive force of freedom and democracy in the world, while liberals are fighting for a reality that describes America as irredeemably flawed and needing to be completely remade, or maybe just done away with completely and we just rename it, or whatever that kind of narrative line they're trying to sell us, right? But because liberals are only happy when they are winning, even if that win comes through a dishonest means, it makes them blind to their own shitty optics. Where do we see an example of that right now, right? Just think about it in your own world. I don't have an image of it here, but we've seen many, many images. As soon as Joe Biden was christened the president-elect by the media, immediately we saw all the liberals go out into the streets and start dancing and having a party and singing music, singing to songs, changing the lyrics about how bad Trump is and he's gone now, yay, 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 right? Where were they doing all this dancing? In the city squares, right? And what do you see in the background of all these people singing and dancing? You still see boarded up businesses all around them. The optics suck for these people. Hey, if we would have lost, we would have burned down all these businesses and destroyed your cities. But since we won, we're going to dance in front of you. The optics are right there in front of us. People dancing in front of boarded up businesses that they would have destroyed if they didn't win. They're totally fine breaking laws, demoralizing the country, and will literally revel in other people's misery as they celebrate their own fraudulent win. They just don't care how their actions affect others. They are unscrupulous and they're amoral people. But on the other hand, what else do we see in terms of optics, right? 75 million Americans now. I think it was 71 million 3 days ago. They voted for Trump, and even though Democrats did everything they could to demoralize those Americans and drive them to frustration and make them angry and get under their skin and tell them you lost and here's our guy and he's the president-elect and we're going to make a TV show about it and parade him around on television in front of your eyes. Did we take the bait? Did the Americans that voted for Donald Trump take the bait? No, they didn't. Even though 75 million people that voted for Donald Trump are being prodded and egged on by these cynical, nasty, narcissistic people, we did not stoop to their level and go out and burn cities down. I mean, that's testament to it right there. Right now, as it stands, conservatives are winning the long game when it comes to optics. And that's what we have to focus on. Continually focusing in right there. This is an optics war that's going on right now. And if we can keep our eyes on that concept, that idea of having a healthy republic, and encouraging that in our families, encouraging that in our communities, and keep trying to reach out to these liberals. I mean, I say that as I'm shrugging my shoulders, but we do. We have to still keep hope alive and continue reaching out to our liberal neighbors and friends. Okay, so look, if they win this election, if Joe Biden is the president, yes, we'll go into a temporary dark time. Right? United States, we've survived worse than, having a lame duck president. And that's the good news on it, right? I mean, the consensus really was held down. The consensus is still there. America is not buying the line of bull that the liberals are selling us. We voted almost down ticket completely for conservatives, which also kind of makes it suspect that Donald Trump lost, especially with 75 million votes from Americans. It's like, what? You guys drove out a bigger vote than that? Really? Joe Biden drove out that vote? I don't buy it. Anyways, even just from a common sense perspective, I don't even need a lawyer to tell me that there's proof. It's just like, I feel like the writing's on the wall, right? Okay, so back on topic. Look, the point is this. We're wrapping up this video. Our republic hangs in the balance, right? That's why it's so important for us as conservatives to continue to engage in the optics war that is raging right now. Our mission is to promote a republic that is held together by the virtue, public spiritedness, and the self-denial of its people. That includes us, that includes everybody that our life touches. We need to encourage sovereignty that we know rests with the people, not with the monarchy, not with the nobles. And if we as people can avoid giving into the corruption, the selfishness, and the indolence, then we can avoid bringing the roof down on this great republic. In fact, we can make it stronger than ever. And that's what we're all about here at Americana X, making our country as strong as it can possibly be. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you agree with me? Do you agree with me that we're in an optics war? Do you agree with me that the republic is held together by virtue, public spiritedness, and self-denial of its people? Let me know. And in the meantime, this has been Americana X Newswatch. I'm Greg D, coming to you live from Los Angeles, California. We will see you on the next episode of Newswatch.